Hey, good morning, and so on. But coming back to Bitcoin, and like I said, I think majority of you guys are looking at kind of Bitcoin crypto markets, in general. So I just wanted to cover a little bit more kind of an update, right, in terms of what's really happening, right? So some people will turn around and say, "Oh, well, the price is going up," and you're saying nothing's changed. Look, guys, the reality is nothing's really changed, right? And when I say nothing's changed, this goes back to what I actually published in a book, right, or had published in a book back before May, right? So the reason for me nothing's changed. Let me just show you this, right? Starting off with, I talked about the example scenario, right? This is chapter 20 of my book, Master the Art of Trading, published in May, I think it was May the 11th, right? I talked about where we were, what we were doing, right? Now, if you look at this particular level, right, I'm talking about where we were there was this ST move, right, with a view of coming up from here, up, above the AR, right, into this region. We still need to come back down, right? So the reason I say for me, nothing's changed at all. We haven't seen the spring. We haven't had any kind of, massive momentum shift or anything else, right? My biggest fear of all, right, is if this is deemed as bullish, right, crypto's in trouble. Simple as, right? If you look at the levels, you look at kind of key points, and I'll come into all the key points in a second, right, in terms of what I'm seeing, kind of why I'm seeing what I'm seeing, right? To start with, there's definitely areas of interest, areas of liquidity, right, in and around this level, right? We've got another little piece in and around here. We've also got some of these imbalance type zones and areas and regions, right? So there's a massive cluster kind of gathering, right? We've also got another one sitting obviously in and around this. I think we've touched on there from there back up to something like this, right? So for me, you can draw this kind of gigantic box that looks something like this, right? So we're gonna have to come back down 25k, kind of regardless, right? There's no doubt about that in my mind, right? The question then becomes how far we come down, right? Now, in terms of Wyckoff schematics, you don't always have to have a deep move into these types of plays, right? They just need to be apparent, right? They don't need to be deep per se, right? So we don't need to see a spring move that comes down. We could see a schematic too, and we basically go sideways up, right? However, the point being is in a much larger accumulation scale, right? And I'm talking about this, going back to what I've just covered in the book again, right? This is going up a couple of pages, this one here, right? We're talking about a move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Which technically puts us in a potential much larger scale 1, right? Which means 1, 2, right? Down, right? Now, 1, 2 down is where I think the accumulation cycle hasn't had enough time to play itself out, right? So it's just kind of as simple as that. So the reason I'm going to say again, nothing has changed in terms of my belief, my opinion, my analysis, is that since having that book published, right, not just I'm guessing this, I was confident enough in these moves to publish it, right? In terms of what we've done, we've literally gone up, right? We've covered more just above an AR type move, right, which is exactly as one would expect when you're looking and analyzing Wyckoff moves, right? We've come above an AR, right? So we've come up, we've come back down, we've gone. So in essence, we've created somewhere along kind of phase A, right? And that's scary for a lot of retail traders who are only looking at this going, oh, we bullish, we bullish, we bullish, we've rallied, right? The truth of the matter, guys, right? If you look at what I've said, even in the last couple of streams, the last couple of posts, right? We are still roughly 50% of the current all-time high, right? So again, nothing's really changed. Plan B, these guys, these influencers were calling for 100k, 250k when we were at 69k, right? So in the grand scheme of things, it's taken us practically a year to come down to the 15k. It's taken us a year to go back up, right, to 35, 36, 37k. When you're talking Bitcoin, right, 1 or 2k, 3, 4k realistically, right, anything can be moved, and moved with just a little bit of hopium, right? We obviously saw the fake news in terms of BlackRock's ETF being approved, right? Now, one of the things, let me just share this one with you, right? If you look at the first US ETF being launched, right? Look at where this was, right? These bigger players have no concerns in terms of time, right? They've got bigger, deeper pockets than all of the retail players combined, right? And that's one institutional player, right? In the grand scheme of things, what you need to understand is that Bitcoin becoming institutionalized doesn't always necessarily mean up in a straight line, right? It means that the way that the price changes, right, and the way that it behaves alters, right? Now, ultimately, bigger picture, of course, it's going to go up, right? There's no question about it going up bigger picture. What you have to look at is what are we doing shorter time frame, right? Now, again, I've covered this, time and time again, right? The reality is we've got masses amount of liquidity, right? Sat under 25k, right? So forget the levels, right? You're looking at 25k as a level, right? Anything below that would be deemed currently as kind of fair value, right? Now, I'm going to share a couple of other things. Prior to the move up that we've just seen, right? I talked about this in the last subscribers video, or one of the last. This was going back obviously a while. This was on the 27th of September, right? Now, I talked about a couple of these particular moves, right? And why we had obviously a large MP level, right? The first zone of interest, right? The liquidity one. Now, what I would have liked to have seen, right, is obviously the stab down into this lower level, right? And the reason that I was keen on this, and I'm still keen on this, right, is that this particular move down into the liquidity, right, would have been optimal for sustaining this even further, right? I think if we tag down this kind of play was almost guaranteed, right? It was kind of on the table, right? I think unfortunately what we had is this first level, right? Now we've obviously run up a little bit, probably more towards this green area, right? Now I'll touch on this in a second, right? But in essence, we're still desperate for liquidity to the downside, regardless, right? There's, like I said, for me, there's no doubt about this. We're not seeing 100k before we see 25k again, right? The 25k brings that liquidity, right? Brings the opportunity, and I think the fact that we've got retail screaming right now, it's bullish, it's bullish, it's bullish, right? There's going to be a lot of broken hearts, and probably by Christmas, right? So for me, and this is part of the reason I've actually used the thumbnail that I've used this morning on this particular stream, is I just don't see any real world scenario where a BlackRock ETF gets approved and BlackRock become the bag holders for retail, right? Just think of how absurd that sounds, right? BlackRock are the largest fund manager on the planet, right? These guys are not going to hold bags for retail to become rich, right? It's always the other way around, and that's just the way that it works, right? Money buys money, right? And that's it, right? Someone said to me the other day about the GameStop saga, and there's a film called Dumb Money. I'm desperate to see it. I've seen the trailer, really desperate to see it. But I think the irony is, from what we talked about around that film, a lot of retail kind of get greedy and they tend to hold on for too long, right? So the truth of the matter is, we've got to a point where we see in some kind of stop in action, right? I've talked about this back in September, right? This obviously is, what we've done, right? There was a couple of scenarios that I talked about with the subscribers, and the point was that without that tag of liquidity, right, we were kind of limited to the upside, right? So if I share this now, on my screen, I've got this classed as lesson levels, right? So this particular point here is, as you can see, right, we literally, from where I was talking about, this was let's just put the 27th of September, August, September, right? Now, the general idea, right, was I would have loved, like I said, this to kind of come down. And you were talking about, where were we to? We were talking about the low 26, right? I would have loved to have seen, just 25 something, right? So we were talking about $100, $200, right, in terms of a liquidity range, right? There was an awful lot of liquidity sat there, and this still is, right? We then basically rallied on up. So let me come back to what I was saying in this one. I'll get rid of this now. This makes obviously sense, right? So I'll clean this up the way. Where was I to? On this one, sorry. So in essence, right, we've come up this little red box, right? This was the next kind of level. We had a little kind of wiggle in the red box. We kind of, danced from it. We come back. We kind of done the jiggle again, right? And then literally come up to the first level, right? Now, on a smaller time frame, 4 hours, you'll see these levels, right, and how they were kind of interacting, right? We had, again, this little dance kind of at the level, right? And then we kind of shot straight through to the next level. This was the first zone of interest, right? And like I said, this goes back to 27th of September, right? Where first zone of interest, right? So at this particular point, right, we're still potentially seeking liquidity, right? This gap from the pink to the yellow was basically pure hopium, right? Nothing else hopium, right? We then had this kind of dance on the first level, and we've now moved on up, right? Now, at this particular point, I'm going to fast forward into another post that I shared, right? And this, we come back to present. And I think it was this one, right? Now, I talked about this. This was only the 25th of October, right? So as we kind of carried on up, right? I've talked about obviously this with subscribers being a heavy level of liquidity, right? Massive, massive zone for liquidity. Then I've added this little orange line, right? Now this little orange line, come on down a second, right? This little orange line was me talking about this. We have a fake out run on liquidity, right? So this little orange line, fake out run on liquidity, was me talking about this. Let me add this fake out run. I'll get rid of that now. Let me get rid of the brush. And the fake run on liquidity. Surprise, surprise. Where did we run? Right? Straight to the fake out run of liquidity. Right? These things are not as random as they seem. Right? These levels are not me going, oh, I'm guessing this and I think we could go there. The reality is, when you start assessing the character, right, understanding the character will allow you to realize what the price is wanting to do, even shorter time frame, right? Now, as we kind of run through this, right, I didn't think that we'd get here in the first move. Genuinely didn't think, right? This was the hopium. This was the kind of the Blackrock ETF, approved, then not approved, et cetera, et cetera. And we've literally kind of, we've come across, right? This move sideways, right, fueled by a fake out run back to the same level, right? These levels, like I said, are not random, right? All we've done now is we've sustained this, right? We've got a US holiday this week, right? This Friday, yesterday, just gone, which basically means the COT data, crypto COT, the COT data, right? I've basically said ignore this till Monday. I think Peter Hammer actually shared this saying it was a US holiday, right? I'd done a little bit of research and found that, it wasn't out now until Monday. Which basically means COT leverage funds, right? This was last week's data. The shorts have increased, right? Yes, the longs have increased as well, right? But look at the gap, look at the void, right? So my question is, who's actually selling to retail if retail are bullish at this particular point? There's the answer kind of within the question, right? So, grand scheme of things, what we have to look at is a couple of things, right? Are we ready for a 100K move? Nope, right? Have we had a fake out run on liquidity? Yes. Will we test this level a couple of times? Potentially, right? There's a massive master pattern up at 39.8, right? 40K would be a lovely level for a fake out, right? Now, at this particular point, we're talking 38.40, 2K, 2K with hopium, 2K in Bitcoin, not the end of the world, right? So shorter time frame sentiment is big boy selling, little guys buying, right? Lambos by Christmas seems to be the cry in the call. We've got potential for Blackrock to become the biggest charity in history by making retail traders rich, right? So absurd this sounds. We're in this position right now, right, where we've done nothing different to what I said going back to May, right? We've had an ST up type move, the first sign of strength, right? We're early in a larger scale accumulation, which means I'm bullish in the long run, right? Shorter time frame, we've had the run on liquidity. We've moved up with little to no volume in the grand scheme of things. We've definitely had the hopium from the pink to the yellow, right, based on the Bitcoin ETF, which has actually created a couple of areas of higher levels liquidity, right, inside the move itself, right? So there's a couple of key areas that we can identify, right? There's a couple of things that I've talked about, especially on the subscriber stream. There's a couple of things I've talked about in the open kind of public streams. In the grand scheme of things, guys, look, for me, still nothing's changed, right? We've literally gone up a couple more grand in terms of hopium. We've run on liquidity. We've hyped up with the hopium, and we've literally tagged levels that I've identified, months ago in advance in terms of what we've actually done, right? So putting all these things together, right, it comes back to the same old story, right? We currently 50%-ish underneath the all-time high, right? I've talked about why these moves were becoming institutionalized back in 2020, right? This was obviously when I could make some of these moves and calls kind of public. Seeing things like the reaccumulation, right? So these things, they've become more and more obvious as we've moved, right? This was the first, all-time high and down back to the 28K level, right? These things, guys, they were all mapped out in advance, months in advance, right? This was obviously, I think we kind of tagged the bottom first of all. This was in, April, May to June, so mid-May, right? From an 18th of March call calling for 28K, right? We had then that accumulation at the bottom. We had a very ugly move, 0-1, 1 back down 2, right? I hated that move, right? But what it meant was that particular move meant that we could actually call the truncation move, right? This was obviously, I know it's a bit blurry. This was on the 24th of August saying we're going to go down to go up to take a 65K, take liquidity at 65K, and we're going to see 40K again very quick, right? These things, like I said, they're not random, right? And the more institutionalized this becomes, the more obvious these plays get, right? We saw the run on liquidity, 65K, plan B, and all these, kind of clowns were calling for 135K worst case scenario by next month. And then we dropped down, guess where? 40K, the first 40K spike, we had a redistribution, right? The redistribution also was obvious. This was, how to use trendline breaks. What are we going to expect in terms of these trendline breaks? Why would we drop below? And this was, again, the start of the trendline, guys. These are not, these are not difficult to read. These are not difficult things to see. I've talked about this, like I said, months and months and months, right? In advance. Smart money, dumb trades. This is where we are right now, right? We're in this kind of cycle where it brings me back to what I've discussed, right? We're in this move, we're just early, right? And therefore, putting all of these pieces together, it's look, it's there, it's in front of you, it's there, right? This is obvious. So, on that particular note, I'm going to finish for the weekend, right? I think, like I said, for me, it goes back to nothing grand scheme of things have changed. We've had a run, we've had the hopium, we've tagged these levels, like I've said. We've covered this obviously in the streams, and right now we kind of overbought on, I think, everything. We're overbought on the stochastic, on the weekly. We're overbought on the monthly, or more or less, So again, a little couple of dances, like I said, up and back to these levels. I wouldn't be surprised to see that 39 MP get hit for the sake of, it is Bitcoin. We've got a top zone laid out, 42.3, I think is the kind of the next kind of key area. If we do run above that range, I'd love to see 39.8 and down. That would be the ideal trade, knowing that there's so much liquidity down, down low. But I guess in the grand scheme of things, guys, like I'm not bullish on this for Christmas. I'm not bullish in this. Probably, I'm not even all that bullish going into the halving, right? I think there's a couple of scenarios that I can see playing out, which is really going to sucker retail in bigger picture. I think all I want to see is confirmation come back down, and that confirmation change of character, ultimately means the big boys have had enough time to accumulate. They've accumulated enough, and they are ready to take this long. I think until then, until we see this character change, until we see confirmation of the change. I think this is a kind of retail game that, yes, you can get lucky, you can take a couple of $100 long, but I guess in the grand scheme of things, just trade with caution and just be prepared for that kind of wicked wild move in the opposing direction, right? Because I think when it does go, it's going to pop a lot faster than we've actually kind of, I'd say, rallied up, but I don't think we've actually rallied up. I think we've ground up. So I think the grind up would normally equate to a pretty seismic kind of drop down. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to just check to see if there's any questions. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you obviously on the next stream. Nope, no questions from there, so I'll give it a couple of seconds if you guys are watching, maybe want any questions, anything else to kind of look at or whatever. I got a couple of minutes spare, and if not, I'll leave you guys to it and get back to my weekend and some more renovation work to do for me. So like I said, enjoy the weekend, guys. Again, thanks for watching. See you on the next one. Bye. Cheers, Risk City. See you on the next stream.